So yeah, morning everyone. For those of you who don't know, I'm Sam Ford. I'm a recruitment specialist at a company called Yeo Valley. We're a dairy products manufacturer based predominantly in the southwest of England, although we do have a cafe up in London. We produce a range of products, so probably best known for yogurts, but also do make ice creams and desserts. I've been working for the business for just over 2 years, and we've been on a bit of a journey from a recruitment perspective in that time, which I'm going to talk a bit about today. I think in terms of my background, I've been working in recruitment for just shy of 9 years now. Started working for a recruitment consultancy initially, and then moved in-house and kind of haven't looked back. So worked for various companies. I've worked in legal services, I've worked in energy, and more recently sort of FMCG and food manufacturing. So as I say, going to talk about getting the right people and good recruitment practice, kind of through the lens of the experience that we've had here at Yeo Valley for the time that I'm talking today. And I think it's an interesting one because it's a really big topic, and it is sometimes quite difficult to know where to start when you're thinking about how you can improve your recruitment practice or how you can improve your function. And I think perhaps in a fairly ironic sense, the best place to start is with lots of questions. I know that's certainly where we started when I started looking at our recruitment setup and function when I joined just over 2 years ago. And I think that probably the first and most important question is, what's the relevance of good recruitment practice? And I did this talk on our journey, similar talk on our journey for a CIPD event earlier in the year, where I said the relevance at that point was the sort of buoyancy in the recruitment market, that employment was at an all-time high. Companies were competing for good candidates because there was such an availability of jobs. And I guess you fast forward 7 months and we're in a very different period of time now, which is interesting. But I think, good recruitment practice is still as important, if not more important. And I'll come on to talk a little bit about why a little bit later on in the slide deck. But yeah, so I think other questions to ask are what does your current process look like? What are the opportunities? What are the gaps? What's done well? What's not done quite so well? Think about who are your key stakeholders and key audiences. From a stakeholder's perspective, you're going to be thinking about hiring managers internally. Now, I know Andrew touched on it earlier with the surveys that he ran at EKC there. So, thinking about your stakeholders, think about the exec team, how bought into they are, or how bought into good recruitment practice are they? That's quite an important question, because if they're not bought into it, it's probably going to be a bit of a struggle for you to make improvements. How does your process align to your strategy is another important question. Again, I think if your processes don't align to the overall business strategic priorities and objectives, gaining investment for things like marketing budgets and some of the things that we've been discussing as challenges throughout the session this morning are probably going to be a bit of a struggle, really. So what's next? Well, I think, funnily enough, it's probably more questions, but with a slightly different angle or a switch of focus, I would say, to focusing on measurement. I think Peter Drucker said what gets measured gets managed, and it's really important to think about how you measure success as a recruitment function and what success will look like. If you've got a sense of where you are currently, where you want to be, think about what KPIs or SLAs you have in place and how you're tracking against those. I know Kim talked in detail about metrics earlier, and I'll talk a little bit about that a little bit later in the presentation. So that all sounds probably a bit vague at the moment, and you might be thinking, well, what's the relevance? And I think the answer is that once you've established the answers to those questions, you can clearly sort of create your path to better recruitment practice. And it'll be different for everybody's, different businesses and different business needs. If you're a business that has a heavy reliance on agencies for filling roles, if you hire 90% of new starters through agencies, you might want to look at reducing your agency spend, because that will undoubtedly be having an impact on your business's bottom line. If your time to hire is 150 days, you might want to look at reducing that down to 60, because again, that's likely to be having an impact on your business from an operational perspective. Thinking about your strategy, if it's about recruiting and retaining top talent and making sure that you're commercially competitive from that perspective, it's important to ensure that you've got the tools and expertise in-house to do that, and the support on hand for your hiring managers and the people that are actually doing the recruiting at the coalface. So I think that's the kind of importance of asking those questions and establishing where you are to sort of work out where you want to be. That's certainly what we did when I joined the company just over 2 years ago. And then there are a few things to consider focusing on, certainly things that we focused on throughout the sort of 2-year turnaround or transformation of the recruitment setup that we've been on. The first is employer brand. I think it's really important that you're owning your employer brand and influencing it. So again, Andrew talked about employer brand advocates and using people within the business who are passionate about their roles to communicate why you're such a good place to work and why it's a great company to work for. I think having internal employer brand advocates who are able to convey your messages in an authentic way is really important. But just going back to the market and talking about coronavirus and how it has changed, quite significantly from January this year, I think it's more important now than it ever has been, perhaps, to ensure that you're doing a really good job of influencing people's perception of your employer brand, because where the market isn't perhaps as fluid as it has been in the past, people in secure roles are going to be much less likely to want to move to something unless they feel they're moving to an employer that they can really buy into and get on board with, what they're about and what their purpose is and all of those good things. So I think it's really important that you consider your employer brand. Candidates are going to have a perception of what your business is like to work for, regardless of whether or not you influence it. So it's really important that you do influence it and you take control of recruitment marketing and, like I say, work with employer brand advocates to convey key messages and communicate in an authentic way. Candidate experience has already come up a couple of times today. Again, really important thing to consider in terms of the populations that you're recruiting into your business. The market's changed, quite a bit in the last 10 years, even with the introduction of review sites like Glassdoor and Indeed. Candidates have a platform to appraise you as a business and give their feedback on whether or not you're a good employer, what your interview process is like, what sorts of questions you'll ask. So people have an availability of information to make decisions on whether or not you're a good place to work, whether or not it'll be worth them pursuing an application at your company. So it's really important to think about candidate experience. And also through the lens of candidates and prospective employees also being potential customers. I know for us at Yeo Valley, we interact with a large number of candidates. I think the last time I checked, in excess of 3,000 in the last few months that we've had apply for roles. So those 3,000 applicants could also be customers. And if they start buying our products, that again will have a positive impact on our bottom line and has a sort of really good commercial bent that's important to consider, I think, when you're looking to run an effective recruitment function. Word of mouth is definitely still a powerful tool. Thinking about what candidates will say about your process is important. The old adage goes that if somebody has a negative experience, they'll tell 7 people. If they have a positive experience, they'll tell 3. So if you've got a poor process that doesn't reflect well on your company, in all likelihood, those people that are experiencing that are going to be going off and telling lots of other people, which doesn't bode well for your employer brand, which we were talking about on the previous slide. And then thinking about how the process will impact your ability to hire talent. We were just talking in the breakout room about volumes of applications and managing that, but I think it's always a tricky one for recruitment professionals to find a balance between making sure that they're filtering out candidates that aren't suitable and not creating too many barriers to filter out good candidates and talented candidates that they might want to be looking at. So again, reviewing your candidate experience through the lens of what your processes look like is also quite important to think about and focus on. Hiring manager experience, again, something that Andrew touched on with the survey that he ran at EKC, another really important thing, and how hiring managers feel when they're recruiting at your business will be reflected in the service provided from the recruitment team. So hiring managers are really key stakeholders. They are ultimately the people that are sort of speaking to prospective employees, so making sure that they're supported in a way that helps them to deliver good recruitment is also really important. So thinking about things like what training's provided to hiring managers and what support they have during the process is key. I think also thinking about whether or not you're providing advisory services to hiring managers, whether or not you're keeping them abreast of best practice and developments in the market. D&I and diversity and inclusion's come up a few times today. I think that's a sort of key area that managers require training on, perhaps because it's a fairly important aspect of the process. So working with them to ensure that they're trained and kept abreast of developments in the recruitment space is really important. And then understanding how engaged in recruiting talent your hiring managers are, because if they're not, that probably is a bit of a problem. But working with the hiring managers to ensure that they are looking at how they can best recruit the best people into the business is going to be really important as well. So again, it probably doesn't sound hugely relevant at this stage, but that's kind of where we've been. We've thought about all of those things in terms of our processes. And when I joined the business just over 2 years ago, we had barely anything in the way of valid or reliable recruitment data. So I remember asking for a view of the number of vacancies that had been advertised and filled in the last 12-month period, and there wasn't any data on that. We just didn't have any useful, meaningful data that we could draw on or look at to get a sense of how well we were performing as a function, which meant we had no KPIs or SLAs. There was no recruitment skills training provided to hiring managers. There was no governance in place for hiring managers to work within a framework. We had limited tools and guidance for hiring managers on best practice selection, and we were using an awful lot of agencies to recruit the vast majority of our roles, really. So fast forward 2 years, and we've kind of turned that completely on its head. We've now got, through the launch of Eploy and our ATS, a state where we're accurately capturing key recruitment data and metrics across a broad range of areas, and many of the ones that Kim was talking about earlier. We've introduced KPIs and SLAs around time to hire, percentage direct, and other key metrics. We're providing our people manager population with recruitment specific training, and that goes on annually and is a requirement of the hiring managers now to be trained before they crack on with any recruitment that they're looking at. We've rolled out a governance framework, which we rolled out in conjunction with our ATS launch, and that helped it to embed really well, because I think where users were using the system, they were also asking questions about the process, and equally, that combined with the training, I think meant that we were able to really capably land a good governance approach. We're now providing tools and guidance for hiring managers on best practice selection methods. And as of October, which I think is the month we're in, we're recruiting 82% of all our hires directly, and have been averaging over 80%, in some cases over 90% since the beginning of the calendar year. So how did we achieve all of that? Well, again, Andrew talked about the microsite at EKC. I think we launched a brand new careers website, which we were really keen to ensure that there was an availability of information for candidates looking at us as a prospective employer, to find out more about what we do and what we're about. So we've included things like employee testimonials on that website. We've made vacancies very easy to search, made it quite easy to apply. And just made sure that candidates can be as informed as possible at the point of application, really, through that new careers website that we've launched. We've created dashboards with recruitment metrics, so we can monitor how we're performing against our KPIs and SLAs at any given point. So things like time to offer, time to fill, number of vacancies we're working on at any given point, applications to placement ratios, source reports, so we know which advertising platforms are working well for us. I think when you get your data into a good space, again, Kim was talking about it earlier, it really helps you to sort of hone your function and review how you can make improvements. Talking a little bit about candidate experience, we kind of started by keeping the candidate in mind the whole way through the process. And with that, we've created within the ATS that we've launched on-brand candidate communications. So we want them to feel the kind of distinctive business that we are when they're applying for a role, and we've tried to capture that and communicate it in the communications that we send out with candidates when they're applying for jobs with us. So that's another thing that we've done in the last 2 years. We've created an enhanced online onboarding experience, which has been really beneficial, both I think to candidates and to the business. So we've moved it all online. It's paperless. Again, something that Andrew was talking about earlier on, being completely paperless, which is great and makes us much more efficient and environmentally friendly. We've got video content that's helpful for new starters, and it's very easy for them to fill in all of their information online, which has helped us, like I say, internally, because where we're capturing all of that information up front in a single place, it's kind of streamlined and made some of our internal processes much more efficient. Talked about hiring manager experience and supporting them and providing advice and guidance. We've, within the system, got a hiring manager toolkit where we've created a range of documents, things like guides to hiring and how we do it here at Yeo Valley, interview templates, sort of information around our salary management guides, high-level recruitment workflows. So almost at the click of a button within a single place, hiring managers can get information about, how we do recruitment here, what recruitment looks like start to finish, and some of that useful information that is quite important for your hiring managers to be aware of when they're recruiting. Going back to employer brand, we talked about sort of taking ownership of recruitment marketing. That was something that we were really keen to do when I joined. It was something that we hadn't done previously. So we created a sort of content schedule in terms of recruitment marketing related content that we wanted to put out to the world, I guess. And we set some targets and SLAs around that. So took ownership of relevant platforms, started creating content, sort of employee related content. So going back to the authentic employee testimonials and advocates that we were discussing earlier, we started to create some of that content and post it out and set targets around engagement and number of followers that we had on the platforms that we were posting on. There's some examples of the sorts of things that we've put out which have had great engagement and I think have helped in terms of the perception of us in the recruitment market as well. So that's kind of where we've got to. There's still a lot to do. I think we've made some really significant improvements. We've kind of put in place the foundations that we really needed to put in place to build on really and sort of make a more effective recruitment function again. So we're planning to build on those foundations. We want to continue to develop our selection processes across the business. We're a values-based organisation, so we want to incorporate that in our selection approach going forward. We want to continue to upskill hiring manager populations with things like unconscious bias training, which we haven't yet rolled out. Another recruitment specific training talks about diversity and inclusion. I think that's another big one that's on the agenda for us. And then another thing that we're looking at doing business-wide is just working on talent pooling and more sophisticated resource planning across sites, all in an attempt really to sort of reduce our time to hire. So there's some of the key things that we've done. That's kind of the journey in a nutshell, in a sort of whistle stop that we've been on in the last 2 years. I thought I'd touch on adapting to a new normal, because I'm sure it's been an interesting 6 months for everyone and potentially challenging from a recruitment perspective. But some of the things that we've done here, we've updated templates in our ATS to reflect new processes and procedures so that we can quite easily notify candidates of how we're managing things from a coronavirus perspective. We're prioritising video interviews as first stage interviews, although we are still doing on-site interviews because we're considered key workers here. We are able to bring people into sort of COVID secure environments and do face-to-face interviews on site. It has meant that we've got rid of the handshake, which I know I've worked with some hiring managers in the past who will be pretty disappointed about that. I think they would have liked to have made decisions based on a person's handshake, which was never obviously advised. But yeah, we're obviously not shaking hands, and we've implemented some really robust procedures for meeting with candidates. So things like temperature checking, track and trace. We're obviously implementing social distancing. There's mandatory mask wearing on sites. There's provision of hand sanitizer in all of the buildings. We ensure that we've got sizable meeting rooms that are well ventilated, and there's plenty of space between interviewers and candidates for anyone that is coming on site. So there's some of the things that we've done to try and adapt to the new way of working, which I thought might be useful for others to know. And then, yeah, I just thought I'd wrap up with some final thoughts in case anyone that's on the session today is looking at embarking on implementing a new system or governance approach. And I think if you are looking at doing that, it's really important that you work really closely with and support the people that are using and delivering it. I think that's why it embedded so well here, was because we set out to be very hands-on with the populations that were going to be using the system. And when we set Eploy up, we sort of started with a very controlled process that was managed for the most part by the recruitment team, and over time we've sort of started releasing more control to the hiring managers, and they're sort of booking in their own interviews now. And we've seen a real marked change in behaviour in terms of system use, which I think was reflective of the support that was provided up front. So I'd say, yeah, work really closely with those populations to ensure that they feel supported when you're implementing an ATS. Just generally, a point of learning for me, I think, was balancing your desire to have everything right with the need to deliver. I think if you get too hung up on having everything just as it should be before you go live, you'll probably never meet your deadline. You can only test so much, and some things are just going to come up when you actually go live with a system. So I think you need to accept that and kind of appreciate that, from time to time, you're only going to deal with things in the live environment. And then finally, the final thing to think about generally, I guess, is about how your function can demonstrate a good level of commercial awareness and add value to the overall business. I think going back to the KPIs and SLAs that we put in place, where we had we wanted to demonstrate commercial awareness and sort of overall value to the business. One of our key sort of business-wide KPIs or strategic priorities is around efficiency. So we wanted to become much more efficient in the use of agencies. And since launching the new system, we've obviously got the percentage direct stats that I shared earlier, but we've also reduced spend by about £100,000 in the first year, calendar year. So, and have aspirations to make bigger savings beyond that. And in terms of our recruitment spend as a business, that's a sizable saving that we've made, and has obviously demonstrated a very good level of commercial awareness and value to the business against that efficiency strategic priority. So yeah, I think they're the sort of key points from me. Thanks very much for your time and for listening. Does anyone have any questions?
Amazing. Thank you very much, Sam.